Good day, everyone. Welcome to The Real Truth. I'm Tommy Spina, and today's guest is Lucy Dalglish. Lucy, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Tommy. It's nice to be here.
Lucy, for those of you who may not know, which was introduced to me by a mutual friend, and as our listeners know, I've dedicated this particular season of my podcast to freedom of press and the attack on the First Amendment, among other things. And Lucy is a professor, former dean at the Philip Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. And we'll speak to some issues that are ongoing with conflict that is currently existing with the First Amendment rubbing up against the Fourth Amendment in the world of journalism. Lucy, for starters, may I call you Lucy? That's okay,
Of course.
right? I call my wife Lucy, and she calls me Ricky sometimes. So and there's reasons for that, but we won't go there. It's because she's a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant and I'm a Sicilian. In any event, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Oh, wow. Well,
You can give a short version.
It can be short.
Yeah.
I grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and I had a wonderful sixth grade teacher who believed that a wonderful way to teach children about the world and about civics was to have a classroom newspaper. And I was the editor of the Lake Agassiz Hotline in Grand Forks, North Dakota, when I was in sixth grade, and we wrote editorials. I wrote editorials every week. We sold our newspaper 1 for 5 cents and 1 for 3 cents and 2 for a nickel. And at the end of the year, we took our money, which was I think $104, and rented a bus and took the class to Winnipeg for the day. So we learned to be entrepreneurial. We learned to be critical thinkers. We learned to be creative. We had hand-colored covers on our dittoed neighborhood newspaper. It was a wonderful experience, and it was a really good lesson in the First Amendment and capitalism and leadership and all of those things. So I did scholastic newspapers as a junior high student. I was the co-editor of our high school newspaper. I worked on my college newspaper. And along the way, I got a real appreciation for the role media plays in a very well-functioning civil society. And I realized the role communicating to your neighbors can play in providing part of the glue that holds a community together. So my first job out of college, after I was a journalism major, was as a reporter at the St. Paul Pioneer Press. That was my father's hometown. And then I got involved in some volunteer organizations that placed a heavy focus on freedom of the press and the public's right to know and freedom of speech, and eventually decided I wanted to go to law school, so I did that. Then I was a trial lawyer for a while, and then about 25 years ago or so, all of those interests kind of converged, and based on some people I'd met over the years, I got recruited to move to Washington and run an organization called the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. We were doing advocacy and legal defense for journalists all over the country, which eventually, after a dozen years, led to a job, not really directly, but I became the dean of a really outstanding journalism school at the University of Maryland. So all of those things have converged. My deanship term ran out, and now I'm back in the classroom teaching college students, undergraduate and master's students, what my favorite class of all time was, which was media law and ethics. And I'm still in the Washington metro area, where you get a pretty good view of the national scene.
Oh, yeah.
For the First Amendment.
Which is struggling to fight off attacks as we speak, from what I gather from the outside looking in. And I speak specifically to what has happened recently, where we had some airmen shot down over Iran, and there was some leakage as to whether there was one or two pilots that had ejected, and somebody reported, I think from the Washington Post, that they had a source that had told them there was two, and it set off the administration to go after the press to try to get beneath the confidential source rule and strip away that protection that has existed for, I'm going to go ahead and say 2.5 centuries, almost. Is that an accurate statement of where we are?
Yeah, that is one of the incidents that's been going on, and one of the big stories where journalists and their sources have been targeted. And of course, government control over and government frustration over what they see and hear in the media is not a new thing. It's just that the tolerance for people to speak out and to report critically is less in this administration than in most of the prior presidential administrations.
Historically, isn't that why the First Amendment was enacted to begin with? Because the king didn't really like being criticized in,
I guess.
in the papers that were being printed in Merrill, England.
Yeah, and in the and in New York, and yeah, it was basic Enlightenment thinking 250 years ago, where the thought was the only way you can really have self-government and have a fair government representing everyone was to have a free, the right to speak, the right to publish, the right to assemble, the right to petition, and the right to practice the religion of your choice or no religion at all. It was really kind of a new way of thinking about a government, which was actually ironically lauded by King Charles this week in his speech to Congress.
What a beautiful presentation that was.
Yeah, and a very, very carefully crafted explanation of American history. I thought it was really quite remarkable, very thoughtful.
Well, hearing you say it, and while watching it, although I was tempted not to watch it, and you talking about it right now, and the things very subtle in his points that he was making, probably going over our unitary executive's head. I don't know that he fully understood. I don't know what's in his brain, but the way it was delivered was exactly as you said it, but it gave me chill bumps. And you're talking about it now gave me chill bumps. It was so on point. And so politely, and opening with the only thing we had in common or didn't have in common was the language. I mean, that that was a pretty good opener to sort of break the ice. But where he went from there was just, and did so in 30 minutes or less. I cannot applaud him anymore for the things he said. I just hope people heard it and understood it.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure. Well, there are a lot of people out there that probably didn't watch it because they weren't interested in it like we are,
Mhm.
because we're intellectually and professionally invested in the Constitution and the freedoms that our Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, has afforded us. But we're rubbing up against, and I've always had this issue in being a criminal defense lawyer, the Fourth Amendment. You know, it's been eviscerated over the years with more
Mhm.
exceptions and uh, not really allowing the individual to fully participate in the expectation of privacy that it was intended
Mhm.
to protect. And now that is spilling into your world
Yeah.
to some degree. And I know Congress has enacted some laws to try to protect you, but I don't know that the Privacy Protection Act is sufficient. How's that working? Yeah.
Well, the notion of source protection is an old one in the journalism field. And there are times when people and sources will only talk to you if you protect their identity. And there are times when you want to act independently, so you're not going to just be an agent of the government or an agent of a criminal defendant or an agent of some plaintiff somewhere. And the Supreme Court has never recognized a constitutional right to protect sources and methods, but it has said that Congress and the states can provide that protection. So it is a journalistic ethic, a very strong ethical principle that if you make a promise to a source, you keep that promise. And there have been, in times of crisis in this country, when whether it's 9/11 or the Vietnam War or whatever,
Watergate. It's
or
classic.
Watergate.
Yeah.
Yeah, classic example of that. There have been times when journalists have kept those secrets and have gotten into lots of trouble with the government for trying to follow their ethical principles. Because sometimes the only way you can operate independently on behalf of the public and your readership or viewership is if you can provide information maybe the government doesn't want you to share. So the procedure that has typically worked over the decades is if the government really wants you to identify sources or information, they give you a subpoena, which allows you the time to go to court and try to get it quashed and make an argument to a judge, either that, your information, the information you have is not necessary, or the information is needs to be protected to whatever degree possible. And journalists over the years, that's how they've usually been thrown into jail. It's because they refuse to identify sources, or to, in the case of the Black Panthers and the Vietnam War and drug trafficking and the Nixon administration, it was not protecting sources, but testifying as to things they had witnessed, whether that was a Klan rally or whether it was a Black Panthers meeting. So we've typically always been prepared to go to court to quash a subpoena. Well, back in the mid-70s, the Justice Department wanted to know wanted some photographs taken of a demonstration at Stanford University. And the Stanford University student press, their newsroom was searched, and they said, hey, we have a First Amendment right not to be, and a Fourth Amendment right not to be searched for information because we're the press. Well, the Supreme Court said no in a case called Zurcher versus Stanford Daily. And but the court said, if you want a statute giving you this protection, go pass one. So Congress very quickly after that, the next year, passed the Privacy Protection Act of 1980. And what that law does is it says search warrants will not be executed on the news media of a newsroom or an individual reporter's news gathering materials, except when you suspect the journalist of a crime or to protect an imminent dangerous threat to an individual. And this law has worked since 1980 really, really well. There have been very sporadic searches of newsrooms, and it's usually because the local police don't know anything about that law. It's a federal law. But nevertheless, it has kept the government from snatching your cameras, from snatching your notebooks, from grabbing your computers, and from, basically ransacking your newsroom. So this has worked quite well. And but what has happened recently is with the actions of DOJ and other agency layoffs and other federal agency decisions, the Washington Post and other news organizations have used encrypted software to invite federal employees and others to just give them information about what might be going on in the agencies, because there are thousands of very disgruntled former government employees out there who are alarmed about what's going on in their agencies. So a reporter by the name of Hannah Natanson at the Post not only was taking in thousands of encrypted emails from government employees, but she wrote a story about it on Christmas Eve. And of course, what's the next thing that happens? Oh,
search warrant.
Search warrant. And they searched her Arlington home, took 2 laptops, took her Garmin watch, took her phone. Those 2 laptops have this young reporter's entire career in them.
Yep.
And not just, the search warrant was apparently executed because they want to charge one particular employee with a crime of, with stealing government documents or something like that. I don't recall what the exact charge is. But this has put a chill down the spine of every journalist that cares about a free press. And it was really, the way this story is shaking out is kind of interesting, because when it happened, a bunch of us who are media lawyers went, well, wait a minute. What about the Privacy Protection Act of 1980? You're not supposed to execute a search warrant. Well, it turns out the Justice Department knew about that law, but they never informed the magistrate judge who signed the warrant, signed the search warrant. They never told him the law existed. And of course, you can't expect every federal judge to know every single law that's on the books. But when he found out about it, he wasn't happy.
Felt like he had been misrepresented too.
Yeah, they had, the Justice Department had said, oh, but Your Honor, we didn't think that law applied in this situation. And he was really, really ticked off. And right now, that computer equipment and all of her notes are, I think, still sitting in his chambers. he barred the Justice Department from looking at that stuff. But this is just about as chilling as it gets if you're a journalist covering a government agency.
Yeah. Well, I think you sort of run as I was reading some things you had sent me to read. I have two thoughts. One, and I think it was recited maybe in that Zurcher case, but you're running up against the Fifth Amendment as well
Yes.
when you
Yes.
Start taking things like that and computers, for example. Now, historically, as a criminal defense lawyer, I have learned that the act of production, even if subpoenaed, doesn't really trigger the Fifth Amendment because it's not testimonial in nature. And that was a big deal. The other thing that troubles me is the current makeup of our Supreme Court, where this issue we are talking about right now may end up, and how I can very easily seeing them carving out an exception of some sort that will eviscerate that which you cling to ethically. And I will vouch for the ethics of journalists as a source myself. As a matter of fact, one of my, back when we had real papers to go out and pick up in the morning and get your coffee and spread out on the kitchen table, refer to me as Sore Throat. It was her nickname for me because I cooperate with them. And people don't believe it, but if you have a relationship with a journalist like I do after 48 years of lawyering, and I do criminal defense work, so they want to know what I know, but I cannot tell you how good it makes me feel to be able to speak openly on background is, for the listeners, what it's referred to, and know that that journalist is not going to double cross me. And
Right.
I mean, it's sort of like a badge of honor to be able to know that, because not all journalists respect that. There are some renegades out there, but I know who they are, and they know who they are, and you know who they are, so you just don't talk to them. You don't. You're not a source for them, and they probably have trouble getting sources. But that's a very comforting feeling, and I applaud the journalism community for respecting that. I did not understand that that was simply an ethical obligation. I don't know what I thought it was. I don't think I thought it was anything other than just the way it was.
Well,
So
if you go to the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, which is easily available on the internet, and that is the most widely accepted code of ethics out there, and it's pretty standard. But one of the things you do is you say use, and I tell my students this: use sources and name them whenever you can. But if you make a promise, you got to keep your promise.
got to.
And
Or you'll never have an opportunity to speak to that person again off record.
Well, Hannah Nathanson and others at the Post are saying this is basically, for them, just dried up their sources.
Oh, really?
It's become, I mean, and that, of course, is one of the reasons why you need this to be able to use this practice, because they need to trust you. You need to act independently. And sometimes the only way you can act independently and provide the public with the information it needs is to protect people who would be vulnerable if their name got out there. Now, I was the first to admit that recently things have gotten so bad for ordinary government employees that there are some stories that have almost no named sources, and that's really appalling. It really is. But what's even more appalling is the notion of not being able to do those stories at all. Hannah and her colleagues have been winning awards for a series of stories they did mostly last fall, about the impact that DOGE and some of these other agency actions and FEMA, the impact that has had on government employees and their families, and just really, really thoughtful stories about what's happening within the government right now. And a couple of the stories were about sloppy handling of data, which really scares me. Every day I seem to see a story about, well, yeah, somebody was in there and they gave all the IRS data to the Social Security, or they gave the Social Security data to, and there are laws there saying you can't do that. For good reason. We've all probably to some degree or another been hacked. And there's some sensitive information about us out there. And Social Security needs some data. IRS needs some data. But having very, very loose controls on how it's used is a threat to all of us.
Well, it directly impacts, if you took it a step further, the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Because it limits your ability to get information out there. And what I think people that are listening, I named this episode "We the People," this series, need to understand that if a journalist gets this information from a confidential source, they don't take it as gospel. They're
No.
going to go deeper to corroborate it before they print it. And I don't think people understand that. It's like, oh, I said it, so therefore it must be true. No, it doesn't work like that.
If you want to see a really interesting story that immediately provoked a lawsuit, it was about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. It must have been 2 weeks ago. The Atlantic published a story about the FBI director, Kash Patel.
Oh, yeah.
And
About his drinking.
And it said, it quoted people, mostly anonymous sources, about behavior they had witnessed and that they were concerned about. And the reaction was immediate. And by Monday, he had filed a $150 million, $250 million libel lawsuit, which would be almost impossible for him to win, against the Atlantic. But when you read the story, you realize just how, number one, frightened people must be to come forth and say this stuff. Number two, there are some things in that story that can only come from people pretty high up in the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, the story is consistent. So what that tells me is they're not just relying on a couple of sources. In fact, they explicitly say how many people they talk to. And the number was pretty astonishing. So I would say that while it is not ideal to use anonymous sources in a story, sometimes that's the only way you can get it done. And the fact that they had some information about what he had been doing, really detailed, fly on the wall kind of information, says to me that there are some people who are pretty high up in the administrative ladder who are talking.
Yeah, and when you say it's impossible to win, I think that's based in the fact that the historical defense to libel and slander is truth, is an absolute defense. And you have in that dynamic you just described with the FBI director, you have eyewitness testimony to some of this behavior that was reported that corroborates, well, hell, there's a a video that keeps circulating of him in the locker room chugging a beer. Not that
Yeah,
there's anything wrong with that, but
yeah. One of my students, one of my more precocious students yesterday asked me regarding this lawsuit. It's really amazing to me how these undergraduates are following these particular stories pretty avidly. And she asked, well, what are they going to do if that were to go to trial or they want to do a deposition? Who are they going to use for sources to back up the story? And it's like, well, number one, he has to prove that it's false. The Atlantic doesn't have to prove that it's true. But besides that, my guess is, and some media lawyers would recommend to a client, that you have some sources that you'll protect, but if this thing actually does go to trial, they'd be willing to testify. And I think any good lawyer would probably ask you to see if you can get some folks who can make that kind of a deal.
yeah, and they probably would. I mean, people are somewhat fed up with uh, the limitations, and one that particularly troubles me, which caused me a 13-year gig in the TV sector, which caused the creation of this podcast, is the nationalization of the message that's being sent down to be reported, which is exactly what we're not about, and we shouldn't be about. And I want to say why there was so much restraint or opposition from the original King George, who didn't like what was being reported about the crown. And but the people, I mean, like the speaker's box. So we talked about it, I think, with Mr. Corn Revere. I never asked him how he made up that name, but I forgot.
He's a lovely gentleman.
He is. We did it. We had a great show, and everybody gave me some really good reviews, or gave him. I like my interviewee to be talking more than me. My wife reminds me of that regularly, that it's not about you. But I do feel like there is an attempt to eviscerate the ability of the press to report an objective message, and not the people receiving a national message that's written by those in authority, i.e., the administration. And even Sinclair Broadcast Group is my favorite one to pick on, because they're the ones that terminated me. And, they send must reads down to the local reporters that are written by someone else, to every ABC affiliate they have in the country. And they
And they
read
own
them.
some Fox too. Yeah, they have a lot of stations. They have a lot of stations. And they now have the Baltimore Sun as well.
And the obvious, flagrant CBS settlement with the Kamala Harris interview, because they've got a pending deal with Paramount, and it needs to be approved by the FCC. And the settlement of that lawsuit, I don't understand why people just don't see that as what it is. I mean, it's extortionate, for lack of a better word. And shame on CBS for capitulating. I say, I don't watch them. I have one news source that I feel comfortable enough with. I mean, I'm talking about TV news. And I don't think they've been a participant in the capitulation of lawyers who got threatened originally. Now media Now Jimmy Kimmel's getting hammered again for a remark that he made, surely not meaning what it looks like in hindsight. But I believe NBC seems to be the most credible. Am I is there something there I don't know about? I'm sure there is.
They're all being, I'd say, jostled and abused in different ways, but they have not had quite as much of a direct interaction like that with the government. But I think what in my role as a trustee at the Freedom Forum, I think I want people to understand the impact some of these things have on them. When they decided to rename the Gulf of America from Gulf of Mexico, it's not ordinary people and businesses they went after. It was the media that they decided to assault. I mean, you look for the biggest, fattest target, right? And in a situation like that, that would be the media. But there are some actions, and as a criminal defense attorney, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this, but the James Comey charges this week.
Oh my gosh.
For stumbling across some seashells, he says, on a North Carolina beach that had 8647.
Yes.
Which some people are saying was 86 means assassinate President Trump. Now, what happened at the correspondence dinner the other night was horrible, absolutely horrible. But, Comey allegedly is walking down the beach. He sees it. It looks interesting. He's kind of amused. To me, the 86 means, just get him out of there. It doesn't mean kill him. But I'm of a different generation. That might be something from a younger generation that I don't know anything about. However, he took a photo of it, put it on social media. Somebody said, "Hey, Jim, probably not a bright idea. This is what some people are saying that means." He took it down immediately. But what struck me was a story I saw yesterday, in quoting some criminal defense attorneys and First Amendment experts who basically said that the Supreme Court 10 years ago, in a case called Alonis, said that if you're going to go after somebody for speech like that and say that it's a threat, there has to be some intent behind it. And the law that they put in the charging, the grand jury's indictment form, apparently cited an old law, the pre-Alonis threat language. And then the question becomes, well, if the indictment is telling the grand jury to, bring charges against this guy under a law as it no longer exists, what are these people doing?
Well, it starts at the top, and they're doing what they're being told to do, or they get the axe. But I will share with you that I worked in the service industry while in law school, and it was a restaurant called Victoria Station. It was a steak and ale kind of place. And 86 in the service industry means we're out of it. In other words, the word would fly through to the servers, 86 baked potatoes. That means we don't have any more baked potatoes, so don't be offering that to your tables. So
that makes sense.
And it's still done today. I have friends in the service industry, and that's what they did. They do it today. 86 the sauteed spinach.
God. Okay, so we've got former FBI Director Comey now indicted again on a term that, oh goodness. Oh my goodness.
You never heard that? You never knew that about you never worked in the service
I never
sector.
did.
Yeah,
but it
well,
makes sense.
it's still existing, and that's why I find it just absolutely ridiculous. Uh, I wonder when people well, the expression you could indict a ham sandwich.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, we went to trial on a turkey sandwich, and that was an acquittal. So we sort of have diminished the ability to say you can indict a ham sandwich, but you cannot convict a turkey sandwich
Yeah.
for being thrown at
Yeah, but
someone.
don't you think that if you knowingly, I mean, I feel sorry for the folks who are still working for the Justice Department. They're told, hey, go get them on this thing. They come up with the wrong law. If they knew they were using the wrong law, isn't that grounds for disbarment in some states?
Well, it's just like the AI filings that we are seeing. Alabama just had, and by the way,
Mhm.
I told you before, I think we were on air, that I am literally looking at what I refer to as the Gulf off of the coast of Alabama. So I have my own name for it. Uh, so I can't bring myself to change the name of it. But don't you think the people can see the absurdity? Am I that far removed from our citizenry? I mean, 75 million people, maybe 10 million of them maybe see this as ridiculous.
So one thing I think I've learned over the years, more than 40 years in the field, is that folks will let a lot of stuff slide. They'll say, oh, that's absurd, or look at that guy. Oh, ha, 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 isn't that funny? Until they are directly impacted. In other
Exactly.
words, they go broke, families can't afford housing or food or gasoline to go visit their loved ones, or their children are being sent off to blow up a part of the world for ill-defined reasons. I mean, we were not directly attacked. So this one, if they stick it out and we end up sending more Marines, more Navy, more Air Force, people get shot down, people get killed. I lived in the Bethesda Naval Walter Reed neighborhoods right after 9/11, and you'd go out to dinner, and part of rehabilitation for these young people missing arms and legs was to go to the restaurants in my neighborhood. And uh, that had subsided, but I remember it vividly. And when things like that start to happen, and you can't figure out exactly why. I mean, with Afghanistan, we knew why. We had a reason, right?
Right.
But this is so abstract that I think when people start seeing more of our young folks being killed, they'll pay attention to that. They'll also pay attention if they start starving.
Well, you're teaching the generation that needs to step up to the plate
Yeah.
because I'm on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I went through the Vietnam piece, and,
Mm-hmm.
and we were raised in hell in the streets, and we got stuck in there, and we finally got out of there. And we got stuck in Afghanistan. We got out of there. Now we're stuck somewhere else. I can name a few others as well. But it's the same story, different part of the Middle East or
Mm-hmm.
Indonesia. But back to the citing of the wrong case. We just had a case here in Alabama where Supreme Court not only sanctioned the lawyer for misquoting a case because he got it from AI, and it
Oh
wouldn't
gosh,
it
yes.
wouldn't surprise me that um, these lawyers that filed may have picked up that old case from AI and never bothered one, to read it in what we used to call shepherdize a case, which means
Okay. Yeah.
that's when I used to have to stand in, well, you know what it was. It was standing in front of a
Yeah.
card catalog looking for a word or a phrase that matched the case. It was a really arduous task. And nowadays you can do that with a button and a subscription to Westlaw and found out if a case has been overruled or there's a dissenting opinion out there against it. And I think people have gotten lazy, and so they just stuck it in there. But it would be ripe for a motion to dismiss. Uh, it, but, criminal defense work doesn't work like civil work. Usually the motion to dismiss doesn't come until the government has concluded its presentation of evidence. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard to get a pretrial um, dismissal until the judge has heard the evidence. One last
But
thing.
if you were to go to the judge and say, Your Honor, this statute, the interpretation of it, that's not what it says, and golly,
Yeah.
that one just blew my mind. And let's forget about the whole threat language. You have a First Amendment right to express an opinion, and I just don't see how seashells constitute a threat under anybody's definition.
I'm with you, Lucy. I want to close up because we're running out of time, and this may take us a little bit over, but that's okay because I don't have any restraints in this setting. But I have found myself thinking of the press as almost a fourth branch of government.
Mm-hmm.
Does that have any rationality in your mind as a journalist? Because you are one of the checks and the balances that are not
Yeah,
enumerated in the Constitution specifically as a
right.
branch
It's
of
just,
government.
yeah, you have to look at who constitutes the press or the media these days, and the universe of who a journalist is has expanded so dramatically during my lifetime. However, there are still people out there who are being educated and trained and are practicing the trade and art of gathering information as much as possible, filtering it through their brains, and creating a piece of useful, independently gathered content and disseminating it to an audience. So while all of the channels that we have to communicate with an audience have changed dramatically, the actual practice of credible journalism really has not. We still teach the basics, but we're also teaching innovation. We teach our young journalists how to go use public records, how to data mine public records. The stories that you're able to do now are so much more sophisticated than they used to be, and they no longer had to rely just on anonymous sources. If you can get an actual government or court document, there's a lot to be found, and there are a lot of young people who are being taught journalism, and the basics haven't changed. The theory behind it, it's the channels that are open. And the other thing that has changed is the public's ability to engage. Right. And have a conversation with journalists versus just being sort of this static audience.
Regretfully, some of that media doesn't have guardrails that once existed. But keep up your good work. We need that generation to step up to the plate and try to hold on to the principles that this country was founded upon, because we are unlike any other place. And I don't want to close with this, but it's just coming to my mind. It's like when I heard King Charles speak, it was like, I want to make America Great Britain again. So
I don't want to go that far.
you're right, somewhere between the two. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today and being with us. This has been very stimulating for me, and I hope for the listeners.
Well, thank you, Tommy, for the invitation. I've enjoyed myself.
And we hope to meet one day. Have a nice day. Thank you for joining me today on The Real Truth. My name is Tommy Spina. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you will follow or subscribe to my podcast and listen in to the next episode. If you found it valuable, please take a moment to rate it and review it. It helps us to reach more listeners that care about the issues that matter. Share it with a friend. Stay engaged and remember, the truth matters. I'll see you next time.